Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton and welcome to this Photoshop and Elements video lesson. Here's a great way of making your subjects stand out from their background and therefore your portraits stand out from the crowd. It's called color popping. And basically it involves turning some parts of your picture black and white, the sand, the sky and the rocky headland in this case, while you leave others, the subject, in full color. This creates a really fun and exciting look, but it's something that those who are new to digital photography or Photoshop often wonder how to do. Well, wonder no longer, because in this video lesson I'll show you exactly how it's done. So I'll take you from an original full color image, show you how to turn it black and white, then bring back the color exactly where you want it, and then finally just adjust the contrast on the black and white areas of the picture, making it much more punchy and creating a really pleasing final image. Okay, let's see how it's done by closing down our finished version here, and then I'll come up to the File menu, down to Open, find the picture I want to use. In this case it's called beach.jpg, which is on the disk for you to practice with if you like. Click Open, and it'll appear on screen. Now, when you're choosing your own pictures for this technique, it makes sense to pick one where the subject is pretty brightly coloured. You don't want to be desaturating the background behind someone who's just wearing black and grey or sort of dark colours. Find one with a subject who's cheerily dressed like we've got here, and it'll work really well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just actually crop the image ever so slightly because the subject's a little bit too small in the frame, I think. And to do this, we'll first come over to the crop tool in the toolbox there, give that a click, and then so that we don't change the size of the actual photo, just the way the pixels appear within it, we'll come up to aspect ratio and we'll pick use photo ratio. So when I click and drag out the cropping marquee over the image, you can see that the proportions of it are constrained. We can't make it kind of any thinner or wider or fatter. We're sticking to those original ratios. And when I finally click the tick, the image will be interpolated back up to its original size. So we're not losing pixels, we're just losing sort of dead space around the edge. And to this end, I'm just going to fine-tune this cropping marquee just by using these handles around the edges of the bounding box. So I'll just click and drag that one down a little bit, and then you can reposition the box just by clicking and dragging within it, or maybe bring it up a little bit, sort of from the bottom there. And then just make sure that the subject is just ever so slightly off-center. We don't want them slap bang in the middle because that'll look a bit awkward. So something around about there should be okay. And once you're happy, just click the tick. The next thing that we're going to do is turn the picture black and white, but we're going to do it in such a way that we can bring back the color really easily. To start doing it, first bring up your layers palette on screen. Mine's just sitting off to the side there. But if you can't see yours, just come up to Window and down to Layers. Now in the Layers palette, here we have lots of interesting looking icons. They may be up the top in Elements or down the bottom in Photoshop, but the one that really interests us is the Create Adjustment Layer icon, this little half black and half white circle. When I give that a click, you'll see that a menu appears, and from that menu I want to pick the one called Hue Saturation. As soon as you do that, the Hue Saturation palette will appear on screen, and if we take a look back in the Layers palette, you'll see that the Adjustment layer has appeared also just sitting there above the background layer. And what that means is it's controlling the way that you see all of these pixels below it in the layers stack. So if I then click and drag the Saturation slider all the way down to -100, we completely remove all of the color in the image and we turn it completely black and white. We don't need to mess around with any of these other sliders. We can just click OK to exit the palette. So that's a good start. And what you'll see is if I just click on and off this eye icon next to the adjustment layer that we've added there, we're not actually affecting the pixels in the original image. We're just kind of adding a filter over the top of them. We can always go back to our original full color image there. We haven't lost any of that information. And you'll see how this works when I start bringing the color back through. I'm going to do that using this attached mask, this white rectangle that's sitting right next to the adjustment layer icon. And the way that I'm going to control how this mask works is by using the brush tool. So come over to the toolbox, give it a click, and then before we start painting into the mask, just come up to the options bar at the top of the screen. Now the first thing that we want to do up here is click on the brush presets menu just to open that up. And to start off the right way, I'm just going to pick this hard round 19 pixel brush. That'll just make sure it's got a nice sharp edge to start with. Then I'm going to set its size to 100 pixels. Just type that into the box. Make sure the mode is set to normal and the opacity is at 100%. And now we're ready to start painting into the mask and bringing back all that lovely colour. Before you do though, just make sure that you've got black set as your foreground colour. You can do this by clicking on the little default colour option icon there and then switch them around using the double-headed arrow. And then before we start painting, I'll just zoom in on the image, just using the zoom tool there in the toolbox. We'll just click a few times and then press the spacebar down on the keyboard just to grab the hand tool there and click and drag around. We'll get a nice close view so that we can see exactly where we're painting. Back to the brush there. You can see that all our options in the options bar have remained the same. And now we can start painting into the mask. So just click, and as soon as you do that, look, it's really brilliant. All that colour starts to appear. It's a bit like using one of those colouring books where you apply water to a kind of a black and white picture and all the colour appears as you paint into it with a brush. And what we're going to do is just cover fairly roughly most of the areas that we want to bring back into colour, making sure we don't go over the edge at this stage. And then a little bit later on we'll select a smaller brush and we'll start working around the edge a little bit more closely. At the moment though, just kind of blocking in that colour. And once we've done this arm and this mitten, I think we're pretty much done. And before we continue, if we just take a quick look at the layer mask that's attached to the adjustment layer, you can see exactly how it's working. All of those black areas that we've painted in are allowing the pixels from the layer below to show through, and all of the white areas are hiding those pixels underneath and giving precedence to the adjustment layer that we created, the one that's turning all of the picture black and white. So let's just continue painting into the mask now using a slightly smaller brush. I'm just going to knock its size down to about 50 pixels, and as a little shortcut you can use these square bracket keys on the keyboard. Just tap that a few times till it goes down to 50 pixels there. You can see it in the options bar. And this time I'm also just going to soften the edge of the brush ever so slightly, holding down the shift key and tapping that left square bracket key again. Just going to do that twice or 3 times just to give it an ever such a sort of a slightly softened edge that you can see there in the brush preview. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer as well so that we get a really good look at where we're painting, and then just carry on exactly as you did before. Now we need to make sure that all of the subject is in colour, so we'll just need to drop that brush size again ever so slightly and paint in on that thumb because it's a bit smaller, and then we can just carry on painting around the edge. And if you do make a mistake, if you go over into the sand there like I've done, all you need to do is just press X on the keyboard or use the double-headed arrow once again. That'll swap white to your foreground colour, and then you can just paint over that area and return it to black and white. And then before you start painting in black again, of course you've got to swap those colours around, and then we'll just kind of continue working around the subject until we've got it just as colourful as we want it. So I'm going to continue doing that, and because you should probably take a little bit of time over this to get the results as accurate as possible, I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so we've gone round pretty much all of the figure now, and you'll see that the mask next to the adjustment layer is filling up with black nicely. When you come to the hair though, you may find that it gets a little bit tricky. You'll often have kind of thin strands of hair that are kind of running over the background, and that means that you can quite often get a bit too much of the background into the shot. The trick here is to basically kind of mask it up to the edge of the hair as far as you can, without taking in any of the background, just as I'm doing here. Whoops, just gone over the top there a little bit, so we'll switch back to white, bring that back in. And then what you can do is just kind of drop that brush size down even further, down to about sort of 8 or 9 pixels or so. That should be okay. And then also drop the opacity of the brush down to about 30%. And that means that you can kind of paint in sort of individual strands quite slowly and just kind of build up the effect gradually, so that you get that slightly kind of translucent effect where the background is still showing through the subject's hair. Just kind of keep clicking and painting. And we'll do it over this side as well. You can vary the opacity and the size of the brush depending on the subject, of course, but that's starting to look okay, I think. We'll just kind of complete it up round here towards the top of her head. I'll just bring the brush size up a little bit more. And I think that's our masking complete. And the reason I say I think that's our masking complete is because what I'm going to show you now is a way of checking how good your masking actually is. You see, what you'll find is, when you're working around the subject in this way, that almost inevitably you'll miss small areas, just kind of tiny little chinks of the subject that are still in black and white, and by the time you've printed it out and put it on the wall and you spot one of those things, it can be really annoying. So before you move on, check your mask. To do this, hold down the Alt key on the keyboard and then click just once on the layer mask icon there in the layers palette. That'll give you a full-size preview of the mask, and you can see here that when I click and scroll around that I've missed quite a few areas. Now you don't want to kind of be making your mask based on this preview, because of course you can't see the subject, so it's all going to go horribly wrong. But we can certainly see that some areas around here and just under her left arm there, something's definitely gone amiss. So we'll bring that opacity back up to 100%. And then we can start just kind of painting in once more, just getting rid of all these areas that we've missed. Just working around the figure again to make sure there's absolutely no black and white left on that part of the picture. And then to return to a full colour view, all you need to do is just hold down the Alt key again and give it another click. Right, so that's our masking complete. If I come back out to a full view, you'll see that the subject is nicely kind of separated from the background now. She's in full colour and the background is all black and white. But something else we can do just to liven things up a little bit more is just apply a little bit of extra contrast to the background. Just as we would do with any other kind of black and white shot really. We want it to be really nice and punchy. We don't need to apply contrast to the subject though. So what I'm going to do is add another adjustment layer, this time a levels adjustment layer, and I'm going to make it apply only to those areas that are in black and white. First thing you need to do, of course, is click on the create adjustment layer icon again, this time select levels. That one will appear at the top of the list just above the hue saturation adjustment layer, and then before you do anything else, click OK. No, I haven't gone mad. I know that we didn't make any changes to the levels there. What we first want to do is clip the levels adjustment layer to the hue saturation adjustment layer. This will make sure that the levels changes are only applied there. And the way you do it, once again, is holding down the Alt key on the keyboard, becoming a bit of a favourite, that one. And then just hover your cursor over the line between the two adjustment layers. Once you see those two overlapping circles, you can give it a click. The levels adjustment layer will be pushed to the right, and it'll have a little arrow next to it saying that it's clipped to the hue saturation adjustment layer. And that means that when I double click the levels adjustment layer icon once more, just to reopen that palette, I can click and drag on the white point and the black point sliders just to alter the contrast only in those black and white areas. There you can see I'm sort of darkening it all down separate to the figure, and I'll set that one down there just at the end of the histogram. The white point is looking pretty good there, I think. And by doing that, we really improve the background, but we don't add too much contrast to the subject. Just click the eye icon on and off, and you can see that the before version is a little bit dull and grey, but with the extra contrast it's a bit more punchy, a bit more exciting. And that's all there is to popping colour. A very quick, effective and easy way of improving your portraits in Photoshop or Elements. If you want to retain all of the layers in your image so that you can close it down, then reload it at a later date and carry on working, make sure that when you go to File and down to Save As, you pick the option called .psd. That's a native Photoshop file, and it'll retain all those layers for you. If you're finished though, just come up to Layer and down to Flatten Image. Then you can save it as a JPEG, but make sure you don't save it over your original file, because you may want to return to that and use it in a full color treatment at some other time. Before I go though, I'm just going to show you a couple of creative toning methods that you can also apply to your pop color images. So we won't flatten the image just yet. What we'll do instead is we'll revisit the hue saturation adjustment layer that we added along with our mask. To reopen that palette, just double click the icon, and then using the sliders down here, we can have a bit of fun and we can add a slightly different creative effect to our picture. One idea that always looks pretty good is not to take the saturation all the way to -100. If you bring it back to about sort of -80 or so, what you're doing is you're desaturating the background a fair amount, but not all the way. So it still has a little bit of colour and the subject still stands out against it really nicely. It's just not quite as extreme, a little bit more subtle, that one. Alternatively, you can click the colorize box down here at the bottom of the palette, and that'll let you add a sort of a wash of colour all over this desaturated area. So for instance, if we want to add a kind of a sepia tone effect, we'll set the hue there to about 40, maybe drop that saturation down to about 15, and then instead of a black and white background, we have a nice sepia toned one. It's really something to play around with and just find a treatment that suits the image you're working on. I was pretty happy with our original black and white version though, so I'll just hit cancel to exit this palette without applying any of those changes. We go back to our original black and white background with our nice colourful subject popping out of it, and that's where I'll leave you. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video lesson and that you've been inspired to give it a try on your own pictures, because popping colour really is a technique that every digital photographer should try. Okay, see you next time.